Hello, this is Stan Cloyd in Mesa, Arizona, July 1. This is my second attempt at doing this video, learning all the time. I've got a back plate for my 6-jaw adjustable chuck here. I bought the back plate from Grizzly for 200 bucks, and I couldn't find anything commercially available that fit this set right type chuck, so I had to build one, which is fine. We put the Grizzly back plate on the D15 mount, torqued it up, and turned it down from 10.4 here to 10, or whatever the chuck is. And then I didn't feel comfortable machining away the base metal enough to get this register here, so I bolted on a piece of steel with 6 flathead cap screws, and then turned the register surface that the chuck is actually centered up on, like a 4-jaw chuck. Here we have the new old stock chuck that I bought. I think it was a Grizzly offering at one time. And when it came here in the packaging it was obviously about 20 years old. And I had to take it apart, flush all the grease out of it that turned to hard plastic, and then put it back together. One of the reasons I got this chuck so cheap was that the jaws were very short. In other words, unless you had something of 3/4 diameter or larger, you couldn't grip it in here. So I got some hard face welding rod and built them up. And then, of course, after I got done, these teeth are checked with a file. They're just as hard as the rest of the chuck. So that was a fortunate thing for me, and I got some criticism about that. Some real clutch the pearls comments from the YouTube community about welding on the chuck jaws. I didn't want to make soft jaws because I want this bad boy to work just like the expensive ones. Okay, I've mounted the chuck onto the back plate, and the attachment bolts are snug, not tight, which means I can open and close. I can adjust these 4-jaw type screws to get the chuck to be concentric with the shaft of the lathe itself. You could just throw it up there and grind the jaws and it'd be fine as long as you never unmounted it. But the problem is that if this chuck is off just a little bit, it'll create an out of balance situation at about 1,000 RPM. This chuck and this back plate together weigh 95 pounds, so you've got a lot of gyroscopic action there and inertia, rotational inertia. This was just thrown on. You can see on the dial indicator here that it is by no means centered up. There's about 8 thousandths of variation. We will take the 4-jaw challenge and get that out of it before we go forward. Okay, now we have chuck body concentricity within 5/10, which is probably good enough. I'd have to put a different dial indicator on to really get below that. Plus you get a little backlash in the headstock, so you got to watch you always go in one direction. Like I said, it's 92 pounds for this chuck. It has to be running true or it will shake the lathe. It seems to have a resonant frequency of about 1,000 RPM. Right now it's at 1,400. We're going to take it down to 1,000 and look at it. So that'll be C2. There we go. And there's only a 2-horse motor on this lathe, so it takes quite a while to spin up a 92-pound chuck, and you'll see that. There's so much mass in this chuck that if I had a firm way of holding apart in the tailstock, I could probably friction weld with the thing. Anyway, here's our vibration check at a resonant frequency, so far as we know. There's no brake on this lathe, so you just got to let it spin down. I call that a win because when it was even 20 thousandths off, it would shake the lathe back and forth pretty hard. Now that we've got the chuck body mounted concentrically and we've got a piece of test stock in here to get a rough measurement, we can find out how bad the jaws are and is it bad enough to justify running a grinding wheel through it. And then of course, after I do this, we'll do an after shot with the same piece of stock and the same indicator. So there's my 0, and here we go. 8, 9, yeah, we're 9 thousandths out on the jaws. And you can talk about it whichever way you want, but my best chuck is a 1.5 thousandths out, and the one I bought from Grizzly in the 8-inch size is 8 out from the factory, so I want to regrind that one too after we get done here. Anyway, that's the name of that tune. Okay, we're back. This is a cast iron chuck, of course, and the manufacturers usually recommend a speed limit rating on them of 1500 RPM. The maximum speed on this lathe is 1400, so from a centrifugal force standpoint, I probably won't blow the thing apart. If you have a forged steel body on your chuck, meaning you paid a couple $1,000s for it, your speed limit is more like 1900 RPM because it's just stronger. Initially I tried putting a ring in behind these jaws and preloading them against a ring to get an accurate grind. I found out the hard way that's not the way to do it. In this case, of course, we're spinning her up at maximum speed, and the centrifugal force of the chuck jaws will keep them firmly planted on the scroll, just like they would be if they're gripping your part. So now we're going to try that. We're going to spin up the tool post grinder, and then we're going to spin up the chuck itself. Take an initial cut. Take another cut just to be sure. Okay, as soon as I get my test up for run out, we'll bring it back. Going off camera now. Button. As they say, the proof is in the pudding. You had a before shot where this was 8 thousandths of run out in the jaws. Here's an after shot. Hope you can see that well. I'm pretty well lined up on 0. And since it's less than 1, we could say, okay, it's a 1/2 or 5/10 out. And now whether this chuck would ever be at that point after you mount it from the D15 and back, I don't know. I'll have to look into that. But it shows clearly that after doing about 8 grinds on this thing, I can improve the performance of the centering of the chuck jaws. And my other 2 chucks are going to get treated while I'm set up with the grinder. Now, those of you that have a lot of grinding experience would be probably clutch the pearls, because I'll have to thoroughly clean the bedways and the inside of the chuck to get the grit up before we go on. Anyway, have a nice day, and that's it for today.